All right, welcome everyone to today's Wednesday webinar. I'm Shannon Dill. I'm with University of Maryland Extension. I'm really happy to have you here talking about a great topic for right now, lifestyle tips for a healthy brain. I'd like to thank our sponsors and our collaborators on this program. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Beverly, and she's going to be the presenter for today.
Thanks, Shannon. Okay. All right. I'm just going to keep my video on for a moment to introduce myself so you can actually see my face. But welcome to 8 Lifestyle Tips for a Healthy Brain. I am Beverly Jackie. I'm a registered dietitian and a family and consumer science educator with the University of Maryland Extension. And I cover the counties of Cecil, Kent, and Queen Anne counties on the Eastern Shore. All right, so I'm just going to shut off my video and I'll come back on at the end. Oh, okay. I should go back and just, there I am again. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So I do want to acknowledge that this presentation was adapted from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Community Living. And I did add additional information about this topic that I will discuss as we go through the presentation. So I do have some objectives for you today. First, I hope that you will learn about and use some of these 8 lifestyle tips for protecting your brain health. We'll talk a little bit about some potential threats or risks to good brain health, and then also how to get started adapting some of these tips. No, I'm sorry, I think it advanced too much. I think I'm missing a slide here. Something happened to slide 5. Okay, I'm not sure what happened to slide 5, but I'll talk about slide 5. So basically, your health really depends on several factors such as your genes, your lifestyle choices, and the environment that you live in. However, there is strong evidence that adopting healthy habits can actually help maintain a healthy brain. In fact, if you think about it, many people don't start thinking about their brain health until they notice maybe some cognitive changes or until we get into our maybe 50s, 60s, or 70s. But there's a lot of things that we can do much earlier on during our lifetime that can help protect our brain and keep it healthy. Okay, so because of discoveries in neuroscience, we know that the brain can grow new cells and form new neural connections. And just like our muscles and other body parts, the brain can rebuild itself through repeated use and exercise. So basically what that means is we can prevent memory loss by focusing on some mental, some physical, and some social activities that promote healthy brain development. And this is good news since there are some things we can do. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to explore these 8 lifestyle tips that you see on the screen that can help you strive for and maintain a good brain health. All right, so we're going to start with healthy eating. There's quite a bit of research out there that tells us that diet may promote brain health now and in the years to come. Previous research really focused on the role of individual nutrients. So, for example, there was research done on vitamin K's role, lutein, which is a phytochemical, beta-carotene, the omega-3 fatty acids. But now new research is really focusing more toward on dietary patterns. In other words, what overall are we eating? And that link to neurological health. So as you see on your screen, there are some healthy tips that you can do. For example, eat or drink less sugar, salt, and solid fat. There is evidence that diets high in sweetened foods and beverages can actually increase your risk for dementia. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Fruits, vegetables, and whole grains should be a part of your diet, as well as lean meats, fish, or poultry. And if you're choosing dairy foods, it's recommended that you choose either the low or non-fat varieties. And as always, we want to control our portion sizes and then drink adequate fluid. So these tips might sound familiar because they are kind of similar to the ones that we've seen called the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, which are published every 10 years. And the new group of dietary guidelines has just come out. But I want to bring your attention specifically to a diet out there. It's called the MIND diet. And the MIND diet is actually an acronym for the Mediterranean Intervention for Neurological Degenerative Delay. And that is a mouthful. So you may have heard of the Mediterranean diet. And for those that are not familiar with the DASH diet, DASH stands for the Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension. Both these diets borrow significantly, the MIND diet borrows significantly from both of these diets, which are mainly high in plant-based foods and low in high-fat foods. And the reason I'm highlighting this MIND diet, number one, from a healthy lifestyle perspective, for the last 2 years, the MIND diet has been ranked as the healthiest diet for Americans to follow. And the reason behind that is there's been additional studies to show that this MIND diet can actually lower the risk of Alzheimer's disease in people. And what's really exciting about that is that adhering to even a part of the diet, because you could see that there's 10 brain healthy foods that are recommended. So even selecting some of those foods, meaning not having to eat all 10, every day, you can really still reduce your risk of Alzheimer's disease. So it really kind of takes, this diet really kind of takes not necessarily not an all or nothing approach. It's open-ended. And as I mentioned, there are 10 brain healthy food groups on that slide, and we're going to go through each one separately. There's a lot of resources out there for the MIND diet. I'm bringing attention to this one because Dr. Martha Claire Morris is actually the developer of this diet. So she has a book published that goes through the very specifics if you're interested in this, but there's a lot of great resources out there. My only recommendation is to look for resources that are nutrition-based, in other words, written by someone with a nutrition degree. So taking a look at these different food groups, we have the green leafy vegetables, and their tie into brain health is that they are excellent sources of that vitamin K I mentioned earlier, folate, beta-carotene, lutein. They really all help brain functioning. So for green leafy vegetables, it's our spinach, kale, collard greens, broccoli, cabbage, those sorts of things. The other vegetables that are not green leafy vegetables contain a wide variety of protective phytochemicals that are helpful for our brain health. Nuts are a great source of vitamin E, and vitamin E has been linked to less cognitive decline as we age. Berries are rich in polyphenols and phytochemicals, and they protect brain cells by fighting free radical damage and reducing inflammation in our body. And blueberries in particular are highlighted in this MIND diet. Beans and legumes provide a steady supply of fuel in the form of glucose, which is the main source fuel for our brain. Whole grains promote overall healthy cardiovascular health, which supplies nutrients and oxygen-rich blood to our brain. And then fatty acids contain omega-3 fatty acids, which you may have heard of, and there's evidence that they can actually slow brain aging and improve memory and thinking skills. Poultry is a great source of choline and the B6 and B12 vitamins, which seem to provide some neuroprotective benefits. We know olive oil has a lot of enzymes, and there's actually some research being conducted that shows these enzymes in olive oil can actually remove some of the beta amyloid plaque that is found with people who have Alzheimer's disease. And then finally, rich red wine. It contains polyphenols that have been linked to brain protection as well. So again, if you want to read more about the specifics, you can either purchase resources or there's quite a few resources on the internet. At the end of this presentation, I'll be giving you or be sending you a handout highlighting these tips and some resources for the Mind Diet. Okay, so the second lifestyle tip is regular exercise. Staying active can improve your heart and circulatory health and could even be helpful for some diseases. But before you do embark on any physical activity, I always like to preface that you consult your healthcare provider for the latest recommendations. But we do know there's benefits not only for the brain, but for your overall health for exercise. We're finding that it reduces the risk of some of the chronic diseases, such as diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. It can actually prevent falls by increasing your ability for your muscles for stability, and it also can improve connections among your brain cells. The good news about physical activity or exercise is you don't have to do a lot of it at one point. The recommendation is about 150 minutes a week, and you can break it down into small increments such as 15 or maybe up to 30 minutes a day to reach that 150 minutes. In terms of types of exercise or physical activity, the first recommendation I always tell people is to do things that they like. For example, if you're a walker or you like to cycle or swim or dance, all those are great physical activity ways to be physically active. You may be more interested in balance activities such as yoga or Pilates, or just going outdoors, walking a dog, doing some gardening work or other outdoor work, perhaps, even walking with friends and that sort of thing. So there's all different types of activities that you can do to stay active and get that blood flow to your brain. Okay, so point or lifestyle tip number 3 is to keep your brain active. So when we learn new things, we engage our brain. So things like picking up a hobby, reading a book, perhaps doing a puzzle, anything like that, it causes our brain to be stimulated. But in addition to things like that, also consider volunteering or social activities that keep you engaged. That's also a way to keep your brain active too. Some other ways that you can stay active, and I know we're probably doing way too much of this right now, but is to maybe learn some computer skills. You can practice different types of activities such as dancing, joining book or game clubs, which are pretty popular, maybe some online groups at this point. Again, if you're already doing gardening, that's great. If not, perhaps thinking about that, doing crafts, and even cooking. We're finding a big upsurge in people cooking and baking from home now because many people are teleworking and they have more time. So just by picking up a different activity, something that that your brain doesn't know how to do, will stimulate it, and that's the key in terms of keeping your brain active. Through research with mice and humans, scientists have found that brain activities, what is actually happening is they're making these new connections between our nerve cells, and they may even help generate new brain cells. And that's important for us in terms of building our neurological health. So think about any types of activities or things that you haven't done that you're maybe been interested in trying. I know I have a couple of colleagues that are taking up watercolor painting or drawing, or I have another friend who is starting to learn a new language. So these are all different things that you can try to keep your brain active. Okay, so number 4, socially connect, and we can't underestimate the importance of that for several reasons. We know that taking part in any type of meaningful activities may not only improve our happiness, but also can reduce our health risks. You know, studies have shown that people, especially older adults, who have these close connections and relationships, not only live longer, but also seem to cope a little bit better with their health conditions and experience less depression. We also know that social interaction seems to help ward off that depression I just mentioned, but also stress, which I'll talk about in a moment. Both of these contribute to memory loss. So just like looking for physical activities, look for some opportunities to connect with loved ones, friends, or even making new friends, especially if you live alone. You know, there is research that links, being solitary or living by yourself to brain atrophy. So basically that means that your brain is not being used. It's not to the best of its capacity. So remaining socially active may actually have that opposite effect and strengthen the health of your brain. So thinking about what I just talked about, keeping your brain active through activities or physical activity, if you're doing these with other people, then you're actually hitting a couple of these tips all at once. Now, I understand now with COVID, we have some restrictions where we can't necessarily meet in person, but if there's ways that you can work around that and still be socially engaged, it's very important for our brain in terms of maintaining those connections for brain health. Now, the next one is one that is so important for our brain, and that is getting enough sleep. So sleep plays a very important role in brain health, and there are some theories that sleep can help clear these abnormal proteins in our brain and consolidate our memories, which really boost our overall memory and brain health. We do know through research that inadequate sleep is linked to slower thinking and risk of dementia. But I do want to be mindful here and mention that be cautious of taking sleep medications because research has shown that can actually make cognitive and brain health problems worse. In terms of the amount, it seems to be that 7 to 8 consecutive hours of sleep per night is the magic number for brain health, but it's important that the sleep is not too fragmented, meaning that we're not sleeping 2 or 3 hours and getting up and then going back to sleep and sleeping another 2-3 hours. So if we can get those consecutive hours, that seems to be the best for our brain. Just a quick note on sleep apnea. We do know it is harmful to our brain's health and may be the reason why many struggle to get consecutive hours of sleep. So if you're experiencing sleep apnea, talk with your healthcare provider and find out some resources or some tests that you can take to diagnose that, and then the treatments that can be prescribed to follow that. There are some tips here I just want to mention. So, for example, in addition to establishing a bedtime routine, which basically means to try to get into a pattern of falling asleep at the same time, maybe keeping your room dark, keeping your room cool. These are all things that can help get you to sleep, basically. Definitely limit the use of electronics before bed. The light coming from any devices, whether it's a phone, a laptop, or an iPad, seems to interfere with our brain to relax and get ready for sleep. And then avoid alcohol and caffeine late at night. A lot of people say, oh, alcohol makes me fall asleep. The problem with that is it might help you fall asleep, but it's not a restful sleep. So you want to limit the amount of alcohol, or if any, certainly a few hours before you go to bed. In addition to the tips that are listed there, exercise has been found to help people sleep better, preferably not right before bed. And then even things like taking a warm bath or reading might help, particularly if you're reading from a book, again, and not a device, or use a device that doesn't have that blue light. Okay, so tip number 6, reduce stress. And that's probably one of the toughest ones for us, especially now, because we are experiencing a lot of stress with what's going on, globally with the pandemic. Research has shown that stress is harmful to not only our body, but our brain as well. The researchers have found that stress can produce a wide range of negative effects on the brain, such as it contribute to mental illness. There are studies to show that stress is actually killing off brain cells, shrinking the volume of our brain, and can impact memory. Hormones that are secreted when we're under stress is what's causing these negative effects on our brains. And this is especially true for older brains. So you want to make sure that when you're experiencing stress, that you have some ways to manage your stress. And there are some tips that you can do that I have listed on the slide here. For example, keeping a positive attitude. Again, that's going to depend on, sometimes that depends on the person themselves. But accepting things and events that we cannot control is one way to reduce our stress. In terms of that physical activity or reducing stress from a physical activity perspective, you can learn and practice relaxation techniques. So, for example, any kind of meditation or mindfulness activities, or even practicing yoga or Tai Chi. And this doesn't have to be hour-long sessions of these practices. It could be just stopping for 10 minutes, taking a deep breath, becoming mindful of your situation, and just relaxing. Also, eating a healthy, well-balanced diet. Again, diets that don't include a lot of alcohol or a lot of caffeine. And then, just learning to manage our time. I know now, working from home, being socially distant, there's a lot of things going on in our life, and we just have to sit back and manage our time and try to be effective with our time, as much as possible. Okay, so I did mention alcohol earlier, and one of the healthy lifestyle tips for good brain health is limiting alcohol consumption. So notice I'm not saying avoiding it, it's more about limiting it. Consuming too much alcohol can actually impair brain functions, and think about our functions such as communication, our memory, our speech, and our coordination. We do know that alcohol has a strong effect on our bodies, especially as we age. People may become more sensitive to alcohol's effects, meaning the same amount of alcohol we may have consumed at a younger age can have a greater effect on us as we get older. In fact, there's been some research out there that adults who are 65 years and older actually experience a variety of additional problems from drinking alcohol, especially those who are on medication and the medications are negatively reacting with the alcohol, or if they have health problems and shouldn't consume it, or if they just drink too heavily. Also some health conditions can be made worsened by alcohol, such as heart disease, diabetes, and even stroke. So in terms of limitation, the dietary guidelines for Americans recommend a moderate alcohol consumption, which for women is up to 1 drink per day, and for men up to 2 drinks per day. And a drink can be classified as like a 6-ounce glass of wine, or a 1-ounce shot of a hard alcohol, or a 10-ounce drink of beer. So those are just some examples. But I will preface, too, that there is research that shows that moderate drinking, so going back to this 1 drink per day for women and 2 for men, can have a number of health benefits, including improving cognitive abilities. So if we go back to the MIND diet, one of the things that's recommended is wine. And again, it goes back to moderate consumption of that, because there is some research to show that it can actually improve our cognitive abilities. And number 8, the last one, is about smoke cessation, or just not smoking at all. We do know that smoking can affect our heart, our lungs, and our brains. And quitting smoking at any age has many health benefits. I do want to point out that county health departments have quite a bit of resources for smoking cessation programs that are offered free. I know, for example, in my county, they are doing online smoking cessation programs that are offered free to folks. There's resources that you can also gather from not only your county health departments, but there might be other organizations in your county or town that have programs that might be of interest to you. And also, too, thinking of smoke, I just want to put some attention to air quality as well. So there seems to be some connection to brain health and air quality in terms of air pollution. And folks or people that live in living in areas that are, I'm stumbling here, living in areas that have poor air quality seems to have some negative effects on our brain health. So, I mean, living in Maryland, we're pretty fortunate at having good air quality, but if you happen to live in areas where you feel that the quality isn't the greatest, think about when you are outdoors, limiting your time to when the air quality is good, limiting to exposure to perhaps if you're doing any kind of fires outside, contained fires, and even the use of wood-burning stoves and fireplaces if it's not well vented in your home. Okay, so those are some tips I wanted to go through for you that have been shown to improve brain health. And it's not necessarily for you to adapt all 8 lifestyle tips, but maybe you want to choose 1 or 2 that you could start working on that maybe you're not already doing at this time. But I do want to bring attention to a couple of risks to our brain health, and that's about some chronic diseases. So as you can see on the screen, there are several health conditions that can affect our brain health, but some can be managed, and that would be, for example, heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, and diabetes. If you think about it, these health conditions are all diet related. So it's important to prevent or to seek to prevent these conditions or seek treatment for these conditions, not only for your body's overall health, but your brain's health as well. So getting regular screenings, keeping your annual physical appointments, and just talking to your healthcare provider about these conditions can provide you with some resources that can better help you self-manage them. So I'm just going to spend a brief couple moments on some of these conditions and how they relate to your brain health. So heart disease, stroke, and high blood pressure can lead to changes in the blood vessels that lead to your brain. We do know that heart disease can limit blood flow through the body, including the brain, which then increases your risk of stroke. We know that blood pressure is the force of blood that it forces the blood through the arteries, and it can be very problematic for the brain if the brain's not getting enough blood flow. and if the blood pressure then is very high, or sometimes if the blood pressure is even too low. So a well-balanced diet can help manage blood pressure and reduce the risk of stroke and heart disease. In terms of managing blood pressure, we do know from a dietary perspective, limiting your salt is one way to do it, but also following that MIND diet, as I mentioned earlier, which is based on the DASH diet, which is the dietary approach to stop hypertension. Following those guidelines or consuming foods from that list of 10 will also help control your blood pressure. And then I want to mention diabetes, because diabetes and brain health is getting a lot of attention, not only in the press, but in research. Researchers are actually finding that diabetes is an important risk factor for dementia. In fact, there's some school of thought out there of adapting a new type of diabetes. We know there's type 1 and type 2, but there's some researchers that are looking at possibly a type 3 diabetes, which is related to dementia. So you can help prevent diabetes, as we know, by just implementing some of these lifestyle tips I just spoke of: eating right, being physically active, not smoking, and just having a healthy weight overall. If your blood sugar does, however, stay high, even if you're doing all these things, you'll need to probably consult your healthcare provider about medication to achieve good control. But I will say with diabetes, one of the key factors is maintaining a healthy body weight, and it seems to improve all these symptoms in terms of the high blood sugar and high blood pressure and all those things that are kind of related to these chronic diseases and their impact on brain health. Okay, so I want to move forward here and just go through where you can start. Because as I mentioned, I provided a lot of information today, and you will get a handout summarizing the points that we discussed. But it can be overwhelming to look at all these tips and say, you know, where am I going to begin? How am I going to do this? So I would recommend choosing something that you feel that is doable at this point, and that you have the resources to do that. And commit to that one change, and maybe even start today. I know sometimes when I do this program in person, I actually hand out sticky notes to everyone, and they write down on a sticky note and they decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. And that's one way of doing it too, writing it down, and once you write it down, you commit to it. So you might want to consider perhaps starting off with keeping a food or activity or a health journal. And this can kind of put things into perspective, you know, what you're already doing successfully and what you want to work on. You may want to consider looking at the diet perspective. Are you eating enough fruits and vegetables that day on a regular basis? And you want to start increasing vegetables or fruit or whole grains or any type of dietary components that I mentioned. You also might want to think about your health screenings and looking at if there is a possibility of having any risk factors related to brain health from a chronic disease perspective. Or you might want to start to think about getting more socially active. Now here, of course, it mentions community centers. And I will say that even though some community centers are not open, they are providing a lot of resources. In some cases, community centers are offering videos for you to stay active, exercise videos. They're having support groups or groups get together, and you can chat and meet people that way. So there's lots of different options that you can look at. You may want to think about if you're a smoker, you know, what can I do to get started on the road to completely being smoke-free, so to speak. So lots of different options that you can do. Okay, so at this point, I'm ending my presentation, and I do want to open it up and spend some time on some questions here, because I know there's a lot of information I covered, especially in relationship to the diet. And I'm open for any questions. Shannon, are you putting them in the chat, or are you asking people to unmute and ask questions?
Yeah, they're not able to connect the mic, so they will have to use the chat pod. If you have any questions, please just type those into the chat pod there for Beverly. Great information. I think that we're all trying to keep our bodies and brains healthy right now, that's for sure.
Yeah, I agree, especially this time, and especially from the stress perspective, because just talking to other people through other through other education sessions, there's a lot of folks out there that are experiencing a lot of stress for various reasons. And sometimes we don't think of the impact that stress has on our brain. And it certainly does, from a memory perspective and just from a physiological perspective. It's our most complex brain. It's our most complex organ, and we have to take care of it.
I'm not seeing any questions, but I've heard a lot more discussion this year about the shortened days and the daylight and people feeling differently because of the shorter days. Have you heard much more about that? I mean, I feel like it's something that's been discussed more this year.
Yeah, Shannon, that actually ties into, kind of ties directly to brain health. So exposure to light, we know the more we are exposed to light, the better our mood is. And I was actually having this conversation with a friend yesterday because we were talking about people that live in areas where it gets dark so much earlier, regardless of what we experience here in Maryland with daylight savings time. Some areas in our northern states, get 5-6 hours of daylight now. And there is research showing that the less amount of light that we get during a day, the more there's an increase for depression. There's more an increase for alcohol consumption and also smoking. So from that perspective, if we tie those all in, they are impacting our brain health from the stress perspective, maybe overindulging in alcohol, and as well as the smoking. People are maybe not necessarily eating as healthy as well, or not having the opportunity because I'm hearing people are going to bed more frequently, more earlier, which may help from the sleep perspective, providing they're just getting restful sleep. So it doesn't look like we have any questions.
No, just somebody did send privately, this was a great lesson, thank you.
Okay.
If there's any other questions for Beverly, we will be sending this link along with the PowerPoint slides out within the next 24 hours, so keep an eye on your email inbox for that, and you can feel free to share that. That's on our Women in Ag page.
Yeah, and Shannon, I will send you a list of resources for the Mind Diet in case people are interested. There is a lot on the internet. However, I would just preface to make sure that it's from reliable nutrition sources and not necessarily, blogs or from people who don't have a nutrition background, which unfortunately we're seeing some information out there regarding this. So.
Okay, definitely. Yeah, we can add those links in without a problem. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.